Every breath felt like shattered glass grinding against bone as Yoon-ah hunched over his desk, the pristine glass walls of Do-yoon Industries' executive floor reflecting the early morning sunlight that Seoul's skyline filtered into something cold and unforgiving. The metallic taste of blood coated his tongue from where he'd bitten through his lip during Arin's rage last night, swallowing the scream that would have only made everything worse. The weight of concealer felt thick and foreign against his skin, carefully layered over the purple-black bruises that bloomed like poisonous flowers beneath his jaw and across his collarbone, marks that had nothing to do with passion and everything to do with punishment. He triple-checked the scent blockers before leaving his cramped Mapogu studio this morning, the expensive pharmaceutical-grade patches pressed against his pulse points to hide not just his Omega designation but the acrid stench of fear pheromones that would betray his suffering to any alpha with half a nose. The scent of imported coffee and expensive leather permeated the 47th floor of the Gangnam high-rise, such a stark contrast to the instant ramen and mold that characterized his apartment that Yoon-ah sometimes felt like he was living two completely separate lives. His fingers trembled as he compiled the quarterly reports, partly from exhaustion after another sleepless night and partly from the constant state of hypervigilance that had calcified into his bones like a second skeleton. Every sound in the corridor made his shoulders tense. Every footstep approaching the executive suite sent his pulse into a staccato rhythm of panic. Not because he feared his boss, Do-yoon was exacting but never cruel, but because fear had become the only language his nervous system still spoke fluently. Yoon-ah pressed his palm carefully against his ribs where the pain flared with each shallow breath, feeling the crack in the bone that Arin's boot had left when Yoon-ah had mentioned needing to work late on the investor presentation. Arin hated when he stayed at the office past 7, accused him of parading around for alphas like a bitch in heat, despite the fact that Yoon-ah wore scent blockers strong enough to give him headaches and kept his eyes down, his voice soft, his entire existence carefully calibrated to remain invisible. The irony wasn't lost on him. He went out of his way to disappear into the minimalist decor and polished marble floors, to become just another piece of expensive furniture in the corridors of corporate power, beautiful, useful, silent. The private elevator chimed softly, and Yoon-ah heard the familiar sound of handmade Italian shoes against marble, the measured pace that belonged to only one person in this building. Do-yoon always arrived at exactly 8:15. His routine as precise and unyielding as everything else about the Alpha. Yoon-ah had been his executive secretary for 11 months now, and in that time, he'd learned to read Do-yoon's moods by the cadence of his footsteps, the weight of his presence, the subtle shifts in his Alpha scent that even the best blockers couldn't completely mask. Today, those footsteps sounded different, heavier, more deliberate, carrying a tension that made Yoon-ah's stomach drop with instinctive dread. "Good morning, Yoon-ah sigh." Do-yoon's voice was deep and smooth, cultured with the particular accent of old soul money and older power. Yoon-ah looked up from his computer screen, forcing what he hoped passed for a professional smile despite the way his split lip pulled painfully at the gesture. "Good morning, Do-yoon Sejangnim. Your 9 o'clock conference call with the Singapore branch has been rescheduled to 10:30 at their request. The contracts you requested from legal are on your desk, and the preliminary reports from the Busan acquisition team arrived this morning. I've highlighted the sections requiring your immediate attention." His voice came out steady, controlled, the perfect secretary's tone that gave away nothing of the agony radiating through his torso or the way his hands shook when no one was looking. Do-yoon didn't move toward his office. Instead, the Alpha stood perfectly still, dark eyes fixed on Yoon-ah with an intensity that made every Omega instinct scream danger. Not the danger of violence, Do-yoon had never raised his voice, let alone his hand, but the danger of being truly seen for the first time in months. "You look tired," Do-yoon said quietly, and something in his tone made Yoon-ah's carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. "More than usual." "I'm fine, Sejangnim." The lie tasted bitter beneath the copper tang of blood. "Just a late night finishing the presentation materials. Everything is ready for this afternoon's investor meeting." Do-yoon took a step closer, and Yoon-ah had to fight every instinct not to flinch away. The Alpha's scent, cedar and smoke and something darker, more dangerous, wrapped around him despite the blockers, and Yoon-ah watched those sharp, calculating eyes track the careful way he held himself, the new hollowness in his cheeks, the makeup that didn't quite hide everything it was supposed to. "Come to my office," Do-yoon said, and it wasn't a request. "We need to talk." The word sent ice through Yoon-ah's veins. In his experience, "we need to talk" only ever preceded pain. But this was Do-yoon, not Arin. This was his boss, not his boyfriend. This was a man who had never hurt him, never threatened him, never made him feel like prey. So why did Yoon-ah feel like he was walking toward the edge of a cliff as he stood, gathered his tablet with trembling hands, and followed the Alpha into the private office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked all of Seoul, a city that suddenly felt very far away from wherever they were about to go? The door clicked shut behind them with the finality of a prison cell, and Yoon-ah stood in the center of Do-yoon's massive office, feeling smaller than he had in years. The Alpha didn't go to his desk. Instead, he turned to face Yoon-ah directly, and the weight of his attention felt like standing under a spotlight designed to reveal every secret, every lie, every carefully hidden truth. "I'm going to ask you a question," Do-yoon said, voice dangerously calm, "and I need you to answer me honestly." Yoon-ah's throat felt too tight to speak, but he managed a small nod. "Are you safe at home?" The world tilted sideways. Of all the questions Yoon-ah had expected, complaints about his work, questions about the reports, concerns about his productivity, this was the one he'd never prepared for. Yes, of course, Sejangnim. Why would you? Don't." The Alpha command bled through the single word, and Yoon-ah's mouth snapped shut involuntarily, Omega instincts responding even as his rational mind rebelled. "Don't lie to me. Not about this." Do-yoon moved closer, and this time Yoon-ah did step back, his body betraying him even as his mind screamed to stay still, stay calm, don't show weakness. His retreat lasted exactly 2 steps before his back hit the glass wall, trapped between transparency and the advancing Alpha whose dark eyes had gone from concerned to furious in the space of a heartbeat. "Show me," Do-yoon said, and the words carried the weight of an Alpha command that Yoon-ah's Omega nature couldn't refuse even if he'd wanted to. His hands moved without permission, trembling as they reached for the buttons of his perfectly pressed shirt. Yoon-ah's hands froze halfway to the buttons of his shirt, panic overriding the Alpha command for just a moment. "Sejangnim, I really don't think." "The files," he blurted out, grasping desperately at any excuse to break the suffocating tension. "The Singapore contracts. I need to grab the updated versions from the filing cabinet. Legal sent revisions last night that should be." He turned too quickly, reaching for the tall cabinet across the office, and his body, already pushed past every reasonable limit, finally betrayed him completely. The movement pulled something in his ribs that had barely been holding together. Not just pulled. Tore. The sensation was white-hot and nauseating, like someone had taken a blade to the inside of his chest cavity. Yoon-ah's vision went spotty at the edges, his legs buckling as the pain stole his breath, his balance, his ability to do anything except feel his body crumpling toward the marble floor. He never hit it. Strong arms caught him mid-fall, and suddenly Yoon-ah was against Do-yoon's chest, the Alpha scent wrapping around him so completely that even through the blockers he could smell cedar and smoke and something primal that his Omega hindbrain recognized as safe, Alpha will protect. "I've got you," Do-yoon's voice rumbled against his ear, and Yoon-ah realized with mortification that he was shaking, that a wounded sound had escaped his throat, that he was clutching at Do-yoon's expensive suit jacket like a lifeline. "Easy. I've got you." Do-yoon moved with him still cradled against his chest, carrying Yoon-ah's weight effortlessly to the leather sofa positioned beneath the windows. The Alpha lowered him down with a gentleness that felt impossible from hands Yoon-ah knew could crush bone, settling him against the cushions before kneeling beside the couch so they were at eye level. "Breathe," Do-yoon commanded softly, and Yoon-ah tried, he did, but every inhale felt like broken glass scraping against raw flesh. "I'm fine," he gasped out, the lie pathetic even to his own ears. Just dizzy. I skipped breakfast. Low blood sugar. I'll be." "Yoon-ah." The use of his name without honorifics cut through the babbling excuses. "Stop lying to me." Do-yoon's hands moved to Yoon-ah's collar, and this time there was no command, no force, just steady fingers beginning to undo the buttons with careful precision. Yoon-ah's hands came up instinctively to stop him, but Do-yoon caught his wrists gently, holding them with a grip that was firm without being painful. "Show me," Do-yoon said again, and this time the Alpha command slid through Yoon-ah's defenses like a hot knife through butter. "No more hiding. Show me what he did to you." The shirt came open. Yoon-ah watched Do-yoon's face as the fabric parted, revealing what 3 layers of concealer and careful clothing choices had been hiding for weeks. The bruises were a grotesque rainbow, purple-black across his ribs where Arin's boots had landed, yellow-green shadows spreading from older injuries that hadn't fully healed before new ones appeared, angry red marks around his side where fingers had dug in hard enough to break blood vessels. The cracked rib was visible as a slight depression in his torso, the skin there swollen and discolored. Do-yoon went utterly still. The silence stretched so long that Yoon-ah finally forced himself to look at the Alpha's face, and what he saw there made his breath catch for entirely different reasons. Do-yoon's expression was perfectly controlled, jaw set, eyes cold, every feature arranged into a mask of calm, but his scent had gone dark and furious, Alpha rage bleeding through so powerfully that Yoon-ah's Omega instinct screamed contradictory messages. Submit, run, Alpha is angry, Alpha will hurt. Who? Do-yoon's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an executioner's blade. Give me a name. Not did someone do this. Not are you okay. Just the cold, certain demand for a name, because Do-yoon had already seen enough to know exactly what this was. Sejangnim, please. A name, Yoon-ah. Do-yoon's eyes finally lifted from the canvas of violence painted across Yoon-ah's skin, meeting his gaze with an intensity that burned. Give me the name of the person who dared to touch what's mine. And beneath the fury, beneath the Alpha command, Yoon-ah heard something else in Do-yoon's voice. Genuine anguish that this had been happening in his territory, to someone under his protection, and he hadn't known. The last of Yoon-ah's resistance crumbled. Arin, he whispered. His name is Choi Arin. The name hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Do-yoon's hands were still gentle as they moved across Yoon-ah's exposed torso, cataloging injuries with the clinical precision of someone who knew exactly what damage looked like. His fingers ghosted over the worst of the bruising, careful not to press, and Yoon-ah watched the Alpha's jaw clench tighter with each new discovery. How long? Not a question. A demand. 6 months, Yoon-ah whispered. It started small. Just words at first. Then pushing. Then. He trailed off, but Do-yoon's dark eyes told him the Alpha didn't need the rest of that sentence completed. The cracked rib. Do-yoon's voice remained deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. 3 nights ago, I mentioned working late on the investor presentation. And this? Do-yoon's finger hovered over the angry bruises circling Yoon-ah's wrist like a bracelet. Last night, I came home after 8. Do-yoon was silent for a long moment, still kneeling beside the sofa, close enough that Yoon-ah could feel the Alpha's body heat despite not touching. When he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped even lower. Why didn't you leave him? The question shouldn't have felt like a knife, but it did. Yoon-ah's laugh came out bitter and broken. And go where, Sejangnim? Back to the streets? I barely afford my studio as it is. Arin knows where I work, knows my schedule, knows, his voice cracked. I already failed at one relationship. My ex-husband, Jae-wha. I thought marriage would be different. I thought an Alpha would protect me, value me. Instead, I was just convenient. A trophy Omega for his family's approval. So you left him for a beta, Do-yoon said quietly. I left him for anyone who wasn't an Alpha. Yoon-ah's confession tasted like ash. I thought I'd be safer with a beta. Thought there'd be less power imbalance. I was stupid. You weren't stupid. Do-yoon's hand came up to cup Yoon-ah's face with startling gentleness, thumb brushing carefully below the bruise on his cheekbone. You were trying to survive. There's no shame in that. But there was. Yoon-ah could feel it burning in his chest, the shame of being 28 years old with a failed marriage and an abusive boyfriend, of being an Omega without family connections or pack protection, of being so thoroughly broken that he'd normalized hiding injuries under concealer like it was just another part of his morning routine. "He'll find me," Yoon-ah said, and hated how small his voice sounded. "If I try to leave, he'll find me. He always knows. He has friends in places I don't even know." The single word carried absolute authority. Do-yoon's scent shifted, becoming something warm and protective, wrapping around Yoon-ah like invisible armor. "He will never touch you again. You have my word." "Sejangnim, you don't understand. Arin isn't." "Choi Arin," Do-yoon interrupted, and something in the way he said the name made it sound like he was already committing it to memory, filing it away in whatever dark corner of his mind stored the names of people who needed to disappear. "Will never be a problem for you again. Not tomorrow. Not ever." The promise sounded less like reassurance and more like a vow written in blood. Yoon-ah stared at the Alpha kneeling beside him, at the controlled fury still burning behind those dark eyes, at the hands that had catalogued his injuries with such careful gentleness. Do-yoon's scent had gone from rage to something fiercely protective, Alpha pheromones pumping out so strongly that even Yoon-ah's industrial strength blockers couldn't filter them completely. His Omega hindbrain was screaming safe. Alpha will protect. Alpha will keep safe, in a loop that drowned out every rational thought about appropriate workplace boundaries and the dangers of trusting powerful men. "I'm going to make a phone call," Do-yoon said, standing smoothly. "You're going to stay here, on this couch, and rest. My assistant will bring you water and something to eat. Later today, I'm taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere he'll never find you." "Sejangnim, I can't just." "You can." Do-yoon's voice gentled slightly. "And you will. This isn't a request, Yoon-ah. As of this moment, you're under my protection. That means what I say goes. Understand?" Yoon-ah should have bristled at the command, should have fought against the assumption that he needed rescuing. But exhaustion and pain and 3 years of accumulated trauma had worn away his ability to keep fighting alone. "Yes, Sejangnim," he whispered. Do-yoon's expression softened fractionally. "Good. Now rest. I'll handle everything else." The hotel suite occupied the entire top floor of the Signal Seoul, and Yoon-ah stood in the entrance feeling like he'd stepped into someone else's life entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Han River and the glittering sprawl of the city below. The living area alone was larger than his entire studio apartment, furnished with sleek minimalist pieces that probably cost more than he made in a year. Everything was cream and gold and pristine white, the kind of luxury that felt too clean for someone as broken as him to touch. "The bedroom is through there," said the man who'd introduced himself only as Minute, one of Do-yoon's security team. His face was professionally blank, but his eyes held the sharp awareness of someone trained to see threats. "The bathroom is stocked with everything you might need. If you require anything else, press 0 on the phone and someone will bring it immediately." Yoon-ah nodded numbly, still holding the small bag that Do-yoon's assistant had hastily packed with his personal items from the office. "There are clothes in the closet, your size," Minute continued. "Mr. Do will visit this evening. Until then, rest. Eat. The suite is secure. No one gets to this floor without my clearance." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're safe here." The word felt foreign on Yoon-ah's tongue when he tried to say it back, so he just nodded again. When Minute left, the silence of the suite pressed against Yoon-ah like a physical weight. He walked slowly through the space, running his fingers along expensive fabric and polished surfaces, half convinced this was a fever dream brought on by the cracked rib. The phone on the nightstand was sleek and black, with only one number programmed in. No contacts. No apps. Just a direct line to Do-yoon. Yoon-ah collapsed onto the bed, a massive thing with sheets that felt like silk against his skin, and stared at the ceiling, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Do-yoon arrived at 8 p.m. carrying paper bags that smelled like heaven. I didn't know what you liked, the Alpha said, unpacking containers of jjangmyeon, tangsuyuk, and at least 5 other dishes onto the suite's dining table. So I got everything. Yoon-ah sat across from him, acutely aware that he'd showered and changed into the expensive loungewear he'd found in the closet, soft charcoal gray that probably cost more than his monthly rent. His ribs still ached, but the painkillers Do-yoon's doctor had prescribed earlier had taken the edge off. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Do-yoon serving Yoon-ah portions like it was the most natural thing in the world, making sure his plate never emptied. How are you feeling? Do-yoon asked eventually. Like I'm living in a dream, Yoon-ah admitted. Or maybe a drama. This doesn't feel real. It's real. Do-yoon set down his chopsticks, dark eyes meeting Yoon-ah's. And you need to know something. The sudden seriousness in his tone made Yoon-ah's stomach clench. Arin is gone, Do-yoon said, his voice carrying the same casual certainty one might use to discuss the weather. Permanently. He'll never hurt anyone again. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Gone? Yoon-ah repeated slowly. You mean? I mean exactly what I said. Do-yoon's expression didn't change. As of approximately 4 hours ago, Choi Arin ceased to be a problem. He won't be found. There won't be questions. He simply doesn't exist anymore. Yoon-ah should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from the Alpha sitting across from him, casually admitting to murder over jjangmyeon like he was discussing quarterly reports. Should have demanded details, asked about legality, worried about consequences. Instead, what came out was, good. The word surprised them both. Yoon-ah felt something crack open in his chest, not painful, but releasing, like a pressure valve finally giving way after being sealed too tight for too long. The breath he took was deeper than any he'd managed in months, filling his lungs completely despite the cracked rib. I should be horrified, he said quietly. I should be questioning your methods or worried about my soul or something. But all I feel is relief. Do-yoon's expression softened. That's because you're finally safe. Your body knows it even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. How can you be so calm about, Yoon-ah gestured vaguely. About what you did. Because he hurt what's mine. Do-yoon's voice held no regret, no hesitation. And I protect what's mine. Always. The possessiveness should have terrified Yoon-ah. Instead, wrapped in the Alpha's protective scent and surrounded by luxury he'd never imagined, full of good food for the first time in weeks, he felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Yoon-ah waited until the food containers were cleared away and Do-yoon had poured them both tea before asking the question that had been building since the Alpha's casual admission of murder. What exactly do you do, Sejangnim? Do-yoon's hand stilled on his cup. I run a multinational corporation. You've seen the quarterly reports. That's not what I'm asking. Yoon-ah met the Alpha's gaze, surprised by his own boldness. Maybe it was the painkillers. Maybe it was the fact that he had nothing left to lose. The other secretaries whisper about you. About the meetings that happen after hours with men in expensive suits and cold eyes. About the warehouses in Incheon that aren't on any company books. About business partners who fall out of favor and are never heard from again. He watched Do-yoon's expression carefully. I always thought they were exaggerating. Office gossip. But then you made Arin disappear in less than 4 hours, and I realized, the rumors weren't exaggerating enough, were they? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Do-yoon set down his tea with deliberate care. What do you want to know? Everything. Yoon-ah's voice was steady. If I'm accepting your protection, I deserve to know exactly what that means. What you are. Do-yoon leaned back in his chair, studying Yoon-ah with those predator-sharp eyes. Do-yoon Industries is legitimate. Everyone reported to the tax authorities is legal, earned through shipping, real estate, and technology investments. That part is true. And the other part? The other part, Do-yoon said slowly, is an empire that my grandfather built in the shadows of Seoul's reconstruction. Money laundering. Protection rackets. Control of the harbor's less documented imports. Strategic elimination of competition. His voice remained conversational, like he was discussing stock portfolios. I inherited both sides when I turned 25. Most chaebols get one company. I got two. Yoon-ah's hands tightened on his own teacup. You're a crime lord. I prefer businessmen with diverse interests. A ghost of a smile touched Do-yoon's lips. But yes, I control a significant portion of Seoul's underworld. Politicians, judges, police commissioners, they all owe favors to the Do family. We've been untouchable for 3 generations. And Arin was handled by people who specialize in making problems disappear. Do-yoon's expression hardened. Cleanly. Permanently. Without evidence or witnesses or questions. The casual efficiency of it should have turned Yoon-ah's stomach. Instead, he found himself asking, how many people have you removed? Personally? 7. Do-yoon didn't flinch from the question. People who threatened my family, my business, or those under my protection. Through orders? More. I stopped counting years ago. And you feel no guilt. Why would I? Do-yoon leaned forward, intensity burning in his dark eyes. Every single one was a threat. A cancer that needed cutting out. I won't apologize for removing threats, Yoon-ah. Especially not when the threat was destroying something precious. The way he said precious, like Yoon-ah was something valuable, something worth protecting with blood and violence, made heat coil in Yoon-ah's chest. You could have lied to me, Yoon-ah said quietly. Made it sound better. Softer. I could have. Do-yoon's gaze didn't waver. But you asked for the truth, and I respect you too much to insult you with comfortable lies. You've lived with enough lies already. And that, somehow, was what broke through Yoon-ah's last defenses. Not the luxury or the protection or even the removal of his abuser, but the raw honesty from a man who could have hidden behind pretty words and plausible deniability. Do-yoon was a monster. He'd admitted it without shame, without softening the edges of what he was capable of. But he was a monster who'd looked at Yoon-ah's bruises and decided that the person who'd caused them needed to die. A monster who'd offered truth when lies would have been easier. Thank you, Yoon-ah said, for being honest. Do-yoon's expression softened fractionally. Always, with you. Do-yoon refilled Yoon-ah's tea with practiced ease, the domesticity of the gesture at odds with the conversation they just had about murder and criminal empires. I have a proposition for you, the Alpha said, settling back into his chair. A professional one. Yoon-ah's eyebrows rose. Professional. Your current position as executive secretary, you're overqualified for it. Do-yoon's tone shifted into something more businesslike, though his eyes remained warm. I've watched you manage my schedule, handle crisis communications, anticipate needs before I voice them. You reorganized the entire filing system in 3 weeks and streamlined our contract review process so efficiently that legal asked me how you did it. I was just doing my job, Yoon-ah said, uncertain where this was going. You were doing 3 people's jobs with the grace and efficiency of someone who should be running departments, not serving them. Do-yoon leaned forward. I want to offer you a new position. Personal assistant and household manager. You'd work directly for me, handle my private affairs alongside business matters. Coordinate my properties, manage my personal staff, oversee everything that keeps my life running smoothly. That sounds like a significant promotion. Because it is. Do-yoon named a salary that made Yoon-ah's breath catch. Triple his current pay. Maybe more. You'd live in my penthouse. Your own suite, complete privacy, but close enough that we can work seamlessly together. Round-the-clock security. A car and driver. Full benefits including private healthcare. Yoon-ah's mind reeled. Sejangnim, that's too much. You don't need to. This isn't charity. Do-yoon's voice turned firm. I'm not offering this out of pity or obligation. I'm offering because you're brilliant at what you do, and I need someone I can trust implicitly in my inner circle. Someone who knows both sides of my life now and hasn't run screaming. But surely you could find someone more qualified. More qualified. Do-yoon's laugh was soft but genuine. Yoon-ah, I've had 5 personal assistants in the last 3 years. They either couldn't handle the pressure, got too curious about things they shouldn't, or tried to leverage their position for personal gain. You've already proven yourself capable, discreet, and trustworthy. He paused, and something shifted in his expression, something that made the air between them feel charged with unspoken possibilities. And I want you safe, Do-yoon continued, his voice dropping lower. I want you close. Where I can make sure nothing ever touches you again. Where you can heal without looking over your shoulder. His dark eyes held Yoon-ah's with an intensity that had nothing to do with business. The rest, we'll figure out as we go. The rest. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Yoon-ah wasn't naive enough to miss the undercurrent in Do-yoon's scent, the way the alpha's gaze tracked his movements with more than professional interest, the possessive edge to his protection that went beyond employer obligation. This wasn't just about a job. It was about proximity. About something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. I don't want your pity, Yoon-ah said quietly. And I'm not offering it. Do-yoon's expression was utterly sincere. I'm offering you a position you've earned, in an environment where you'll be valued and protected. What you do with that is entirely your choice. Yoon-ah thought about his cramped studio apartment with its leaking faucet and mold-stained walls. About the constant fear that had colored every moment of the last 6 months. About the alternative, returning to that life, finding another job, always wondering if Arin had friends who might come looking for answers about his disappearance. Then he thought about the way Do-yoon had looked at his injuries with carefully controlled rage. The honesty the alpha had offered when lies would have been easier. The promise in those dark eyes that spoke of protection and something deeper, something Yoon-ah was terrified to examine too closely. He was already in free fall. Might as well choose the direction. I accept, Yoon-ah said, and watched something fierce and satisfied flash across Do-yoon's face. Good. The alpha's smile was small but genuine. We'll move you in this weekend. Take the rest of the week to rest and recover. I'll have everything arranged. Sejangnim. Do-yoon. The correction was gentle but firm. If we're going to be working this closely, living in the same space, we can drop the formalities when it's just us. Do-yoon. Yoon-ah tested the name, feeling it settle on his tongue like something forbidden and thrilling. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Do-yoon stood, moving around the table with that predatory grace. He stopped close enough that Yoon-ah could feel his body heat, could smell cedar and smoke beneath expensive cologne. You might end up regretting this decision. But the hand that Do-yoon extended was steady and sure, and when Yoon-ah took it, sealing their agreement with a handshake that felt like so much more, he didn't feel regret at all. He felt, for the first time in years, like he might actually have a future worth looking forward to. The penthouse occupied 3 floors of Namsan Tower's most exclusive residence, and Yoon-ah spent his first morning wandering through it like a ghost exploring the afterlife. His suite alone was larger than any apartment he'd ever lived in. Bedroom with an emperor-sized bed, sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's sprawling expanse, bathroom with a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. Everything was clean lines and expensive materials, designed with the kind of understated elegance that only old money could afford. The closet had been stocked with clothes in his exact size. Not just work attire, but casual wear, sleepwear, even workout gear. Everything high quality, nothing flashy. Someone had paid attention to the simple, classic styles he preferred. For the first time in his adult life, Yoon-ah woke up without immediately calculating exit routes. He walked through rooms without flinching at shadows. Made coffee in the massive kitchen without listening for footsteps that meant danger. Stood at the windows and simply breathed without tasting blood or fear. The absence of terror felt almost like its own kind of violence, shocking in its completeness. Do-yoon maintained a careful distance those first weeks, professional in a way that somehow felt more intimate than any physical closeness could have been. They worked together in his home office, a space of dark wood and leather that smelled perpetually of coffee and the Alpha CEO scent, reviewing contracts and coordinating schedules with an efficiency that would have impressed his former colleagues. But it was the quiet moments that built something deeper. Late nights when Do-yoon would order food and insist Yoon-ah eat, watching with satisfaction as color slowly returned to his Omega's hollow cheeks. Casual questions about his preferences, music, books, whether he liked the temperature of his suite, asked with genuine interest rather than perfunctory politeness. "You studied literature at university," Do-yoon said one evening, glancing at the book Yoon-ah had left on the coffee table. "Not a question, but an invitation to share. Before I married Jae-woo, yes." Yoon-ah's fingers traced the book's spine. "I wanted to teach. Right, maybe. Then life happened," Do-yoon finished quietly. "Then I learned that Omegas from families like mine don't get to have dreams. We get to be convenient." The bitterness surprised him with its intensity. "I haven't written anything in 4 years." Do-yoon was silent for a moment, then stood and crossed to his bookshelf. He returned with a leather-bound journal and an expensive pen. "The study on the second floor has the best morning light. It's yours if you want it." Yoon-ah stared at the journal like it might bite. I can't." "You can." Do-yoon's voice held absolute certainty. "When you're ready." And that was the pattern that emerged. Do-yoon offering pieces of possibility without pressure, creating space for Yoon-ah to rediscover the person he'd been before survival became his only goal. They fell into a rhythm. Morning coffee together while reviewing the day's schedule. Shared lunches where Do-yoon asked about books Yoon-ah was reading, opinions on news articles, thoughts on everything from architecture to philosophy. Work sessions that bled into evening conversations, the professional gradually blending with personal in ways that felt natural rather than forced. Do-yoon never pushed. Never demanded. Never made Yoon-ah feel like the protection came with strings attached. But Yoon-ah noticed things. The way Do-yoon's scent would sweeten when Yoon-ah laughed. How the Alpha positioned himself between Yoon-ah and any perceived threat, even something as minor as an aggressive door-to-door salesman. The careful way Do-yoon never touched without invitation, but the heat in his eyes when Yoon-ah leaned close to point out something in a document. 6 weeks after moving in, Yoon-ah realized he'd stopped checking the locks before bed. Stopped sleeping with one eye open. Stopped existing in a state of perpetual bracing for impact. He was healing. And somewhere in the quiet moments and shared spaces, in Do-yoon's patient presence and genuine interest in who Yoon-ah was beyond his trauma, something else was growing. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Like trust. Like the beginning of love. The peace shattered on a Tuesday morning when Yoon-ah's phone, his personal one, not the work device, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about your new living arrangement. Meet me at Cafe Mu in Hongdae at 2 p.m. or I go to the press. JH." Yoon-ah's hands went cold. Those initials. That passive-aggressive tone wrapped in threats. Jae-woo. He found Do-yoon in his office, the Alpha's expression darkening as he read the message. "How did he get this number?" Do-yoon's voice was dangerously quiet. "I don't know. I changed it after the divorce. Do-yoon was already on his phone, barking orders in the clipped tone he used for his security team. "Minute. I need a full workup on Lee Jae-woo. Everything from the last 6 months. And I want eyes on Cafe Mu in Hongdae immediately." He hung up and turned to Yoon-ah, Alpha instincts clearly screaming to lock him away somewhere safe. "You're not going. If I don't, he'll do nothing." Do-yoon's certainty was absolute. Men like your ex-husband are cowards. They make threats they can't follow through on, hoping fear will do the work for them. But 20 minutes later, Minute arrived with a tablet and an expression that made Yoon-ah's stomach drop. Lee Jae-woo has been frequenting Park Jin-woo's establishments, Minute reported, pulling up surveillance photos. The Golden Tiger, specifically. He's accumulated approximately 50 million won in gambling debts over the last 3 months. Do-yoon's jaw tightened. Park Jin-woo. The name clearly meant something, and none of it good. Who is he? Yoon-ah asked. Competition. Do-yoon's voice had gone flat. He runs the Dongdaemun territory. We've had an understanding for years. He stays out of my business, I stay out of his. But he's ambitious. Always looking for leverage. Minute pulled up more photos. Jae-woo entering a building, shaking hands with a man whose cold smile made Yoon-ah's skin crawl. We believe Lee sold information about Yoon-ah's connection to you. Approximately 1 week ago. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Jae-woo, desperate and drowning in debt, discovering his ex-husband was living with Seoul's most powerful crime lord. Seeing an opportunity. Selling information to someone who could use it as leverage against Do-yoon. He gave them my new number, Yoon-ah said hollowly. My address. Everything. The penthouse security is airtight, Minute assured him. They can't reach you here. But outside. Outside, I'm vulnerable. Yoon-ah finished. The peace of the last few weeks suddenly felt fragile as glass. Do-yoon dismissed Minute with a curt nod, then moved to stand before Yoon-ah. His hands came up to cup Yoon-ah's face with devastating gentleness. This is what my world costs, Do-yoon said, and for the first time since Yoon-ah had known him, the Alpha's voice carried something that might have been regret. You were finally safe, finally healing, and now there's a target on your back because of me. Because you're close to me. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? Do-yoon's thumb brushed across Yoon-ah's cheekbone. Park Jin-woo sees you as leverage. A way to get to me. Your ex-husband saw you as an asset to be sold. Everyone sees the value in what you are to me. And what am I to you? The question escaped before Yoon-ah could stop it. Do-yoon's expression softened into something achingly vulnerable. Everything I didn't know I was looking for. Everything I'd burned the world down to protect. The confession hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to fully voice. What do we do? Yoon-ah asked. We prepare. Do-yoon's voice hardened back into the tone of a man accustomed to warfare. Park Jin-woo wants leverage, which means he'll try to take you. We make sure he fails. I'm doubling your security detail. You don't go anywhere without Minute or one of my inner circle. I'll be a prisoner again, Yoon-ah said quietly. Just a different kind of cage. No. Do-yoon's hands tightened fractionally on his face. A cage is about control. This is about protection. There's a difference. Is there? Do-yoon pulled back slightly, giving Yoon-ah space to breathe. If you want to leave, if this is too much, too dangerous, I can arrange it. New identity. Different country. Enough money to start over somewhere Park Jin-woo's reach can't find you. The offer was genuine. Yoon-ah could see it in Do-yoon's eyes, could sense the Alpha's resigned sadness at the possibility of letting him go. And if I stay? Yoon-ah asked. Then we face this together. Do-yoon's voice dropped to something almost tender. And I promise you, no one will touch you. Not your ex-husband. Not Park Jin-woo. Not anyone. The promise was written in blood and violence and the absolute certainty of a man who'd never lost a war he chose to fight. Yoon-ah should have been terrified. Instead, he felt his choice crystallizing into something clear and unshakable. The kidnapping attempt happened on a Thursday afternoon, in the underground parking garage of a medical building where Yoon-ah had gone for a follow-up appointment about his ribs. 3 men. Professional. Fast. They would have succeeded if Minute hadn't been exactly where he was supposed to be, if Do-yoon's security hadn't been as thorough as promised. The confrontation lasted less than 2 minutes, gunshots echoing off concrete, shouted commands, the acrid smell of cordite and fear. Yoon-ah spent those 2 minutes pressed against a car with Min's body as a shield, hearing his own heartbeat thundering in his ears while violence happened around him with clinical efficiency. When it was over, 2 of Park Jin-woo's men were dead. The third was already being transported somewhere Do-yoon's interrogators could extract information. Yoon-ah couldn't stop shaking. Do-yoon arrived at the penthouse within 15 minutes, moving through the door with barely contained fury that gentled the instant he saw Yoon-ah curled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. "Are you hurt?" The Alpha's hands were already cataloging, checking, scenting for blood or injury. "No." Minute stopped them before Yoon-ah's voice cracked. "They were going to take me. Use me too." "I know." Do-yoon pulled him close, and Yoon-ah went willingly, pressing his face against the Alpha's chest and breathing in cedar and smoke and safety. "I know, and I'm sorry. I should have seen this coming sooner." They stayed like that for a long time, Do-yoon's hand stroking through Yoon-ah's hair while the Omega's trembling gradually subsided. Finally, Do-yoon pulled back enough to meet Yoon-ah's eyes. "I need to give you a choice," he said, voice heavy with something that looked like grief. "A real one, with no pressure and no obligations." Yoon-ah's stomach clenched. "What kind of choice?" "I can make you disappear." Do-yoon's expression was carefully neutral. "New identity. Passport, background, everything airtight. I have contacts in Vienna, a comfortable apartment already arranged, account with enough euros to live well for the rest of your life. You'd be completely separated from this world, from Park Jin-woo's reach, from," his voice caught almost imperceptibly, "from me. Or?" Yoon-ah whispered. "Or you stay." Do-yoon's hands came up to frame his face with devastating gentleness. "You stay and become mine in every way that matters. Not just as my assistant. As my partner. My mate. Permanently, publicly, with everything that means. The target on your back won't disappear. Being with me means accepting that danger is part of the price. But you'd have my protection, my resources, my life. Everything I am and everything I have." The weight of the choice pressed down on Yoon-ah like physical force. "This is the first real choice I've given you," Do-yoon continued quietly. "Everything else, the job, the penthouse, the protection, I made those decisions for you because you were hurt and vulnerable. But this? This has to be yours alone. I won't influence it. Won't use alpha command or persuasion. Whatever you choose, I'll support it." Yoon-ah stared at the man kneeling before him. Not his boss. Not his savior. Just Do-yoon, a crime lord with blood on his hands and tenderness in his eyes, offering freedom or forever with equal sincerity. And suddenly, with startling clarity, Yoon-ah understood. He'd fallen in love. Not with the luxury or the protection or the escape from his previous life. But with the man who'd looked at his bruises and decided they were unacceptable. Who'd offered truth when lies would have been easier. Who'd given him space to heal without demanding gratitude or submission. Who'd been genuinely interested in his thoughts, his preferences, his dreams, seeing him as a person worth knowing rather than just a body to possess. Do-yoon had taught him the difference between being owned and being cherished. "If I choose Vienna," Yoon-ah said slowly, "what happens to you?" Do-yoon's smile was sad. "I continue. Handle Park Jin-woo. Run my empire. Eventually find another assistant who'll never quite measure up to the standard you set." "You'd let me go? Really let me go?" "Yes." The word was simple but absolute. "Because I want you to stay for the right reasons. Not fear. Not obligation. Not dependence. Choice, Yoon-ah. Conscious, clear-eyed choice." Yoon-ah's hands came up to cover Do-yoon's where they still framed his face. "I already know my answer," he said. "I think I've known for weeks. I'm not choosing safety, Do-yoon. I'm choosing you." The Alpha's breath caught. You understand what that means? The danger. I understand. Yoon-ah's voice was steady for the first time since the parking garage. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing a life where I might be in danger but I'm not alone. Where I have someone who sees me as an equal worth fighting for, not a burden to tolerate. Yoon-ah. I love you, Yoon-ah said, and watched Do-yoon's expression transform into something incandescent. I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. If there's going to be danger in my life, I'd rather face it with you than face emptiness without you. Do-yoon's response was a kiss that tasted like promises and possession and something achingly tender. Like coming home. The kiss deepened, Do-yoon's hands threading through Yoon-ah's hair with a possessiveness that felt nothing like the violence he'd endured before. This was claiming, yes, but claiming that asked permission with every touch, that offered rather than demanded. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Do-yoon rested his forehead against Yoon-ah's. You're sure, he said, voice rough. Once we do this, once I mark you as mine, there's no going back. Seoul will know. My enemies will know. You'll be tied to me in every way that matters. I'm sure. Yoon-ah's hands came up to grip Do-yoon's shoulders, anchoring himself. Mark me. Make it official. I want everyone to know exactly who I belong to. The growl that rumbled through Do-yoon's chest was pure alpha satisfaction. Not belong to, Do-yoon corrected, pulling back to meet Yoon-ah's eyes. Belong with. You're not property, Yoon-ah. You're my partner. My equal. My mate. The distinction mattered more than Yoon-ah had words to express. Do-yoon reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, platinum band with a single black diamond, elegant and understated but unmistakably expensive. I had this made 3 weeks ago, Do-yoon admitted, something almost shy in his expression. Hoping. Not assuming, but hoping you might choose to stay. Yoon-ah's breath caught as Do-yoon slid the ring onto his finger. Perfect fit. Of course it was. 3 weeks ago I was still afraid to hope, Yoon-ah whispered. Now I'm choosing to be brave. You've always been brave. Do-yoon pressed a kiss to the ring, then to Yoon-ah's knuckles. Surviving what you did, trusting me despite everything, that takes more courage than most people possess. That night, Do-yoon marked him properly. Bonding bite at the junction of neck and shoulder, alpha pheromones sinking deep into Yoon-ah's system and fundamentally changing his scent. No more blockers. No more hiding. Just the clear, undeniable declaration that Yoon-ah was claimed, protected, cherished. Mated to Seoul's most dangerous alpha. 2 months later, Yoon-ah stood beside Do-yoon at the Schiller Hotel's Grand Ballroom, surrounded by Korea's elite at a charity gala that was really just an excuse for the powerful to display their wealth and connections. He wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than his old studio apartment's annual rent. The bonding mark was visible above his collar. Do-yoon had insisted, wanting no ambiguity about Yoon-ah's status. The platinum ring caught the chandelier light as Yoon-ah accepted a champagne flute from a passing server. That's him, he heard someone whisper. Not quite quiet enough. Do-yoon's Omega. The one who replaced. Careful. Another voice, sharp with warning. I heard what happened to the last person who disrespected Do-yoon's mate. Yoon-ah hid his smile behind the champagne glass. Park Jin-woo had been dealt with. Quietly. Permanently. Jae-woo had been given a choice, leave Korea forever or face consequences. He'd chosen exile. Smart man, in the end. You're enjoying this, Do-yoon murmured, hand settling possessively at the small of Yoon-ah's back. I'm enjoying not having to hide, Yoon-ah corrected, meeting the curious stares of Seoul's elite with calm confidence. I'm enjoying standing beside you as an equal, not cowering in the shadows. A business associate approached, Chairman Kim from one of the major chaebols, and bowed respectfully to both of them. Not just to Do-yoon. To both. Do-yoon sigh. Yoon-ah sigh. Congratulations on your mating. My wife and I hope you'll join us for dinner next month. Would be honored, Yoon-ah replied smoothly, his secretary skills adapting seamlessly to this new role. Please send the details to my office and I'll coordinate our schedules. Chairman Kim bowed again and departed, and Do-yoon's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Yoon-ah's back. You're a natural at this, the Alpha said, pride evident in his voice. I had a good teacher. Yoon-ah leaned into Do-yoon's warmth, no longer afraid of showing affection publicly. And good motivation to learn. Another couple approached. Then another. Yoon-ah handled each interaction with a perfect blend of professionalism and warmth, his sharp mind cataloging names and connections, building the social network that would serve them both. This was his life now. Standing in ballrooms wearing designer suits, fielding political conversations and veiled threats with equal grace, always aware of the security detail positioned strategically around the room. Dangerous. Complex. Nothing like the quiet academic life he'd once dreamed of. But as Do-yoon's fingers intertwined with his, as Yoon-ah caught his mate's eyes across a conversation about shipping contracts and saw devotion mixed with desire, he knew he'd made the right choice. He'd survived hell, Jae-woo's neglect, Arin's violence, the suffocating fear that had nearly destroyed him. He'd clawed his way through trauma and terror to reach this moment. Standing beside the most powerful alpha in Seoul. No longer hiding behind concealer or lies. Meeting the world with clear eyes and steady hands. A man who'd chosen heaven on his own terms. The danger would always be there, rivals who saw him as leverage, enemies who would test Do-yoon's defenses, the ever-present threat that came with loving someone whose power was built on violence. But Yoon-ah wasn't afraid anymore. Because love, he'd learned, wasn't about safety. It was about choosing who you wanted to face danger with. And he'd chosen Do-yoon, chosen partnership over solitude, chosen risk over emptiness, chosen a future that might be dangerous but would never be lonely. As they moved through the ballroom together, perfectly in sync, Yoon-ah felt the weight of his bonding mark like a brand of honor rather than ownership. He was Do-yoon's mate. Do-yoon's partner. Do-yoon's equal. And for the first time in his life, Yoon-ah wasn't just surviving. He was living.